My daughter ran to me crying, shouting, "You are betraying Mom." Then she stormed out, and I was terrified our bond was broken forever. 5 years ago, a part of me died with my wife. She passed away after a fierce battle with a terminal illness, and I watched her struggle with the helplessness that comes when you realize you're fighting an unwinnable war. My daughter, 17 at the time, took the loss especially hard. She and her mother were close in a way that felt nearly sacred. They laughed the same, held the same passions, and even wore matching bracelets. Seeing my daughter, devastated and trembling with grief, mirrored my own heartache in a way I could never have anticipated. I was drowning in sorrow. Days bled into nights, and I barely noticed whether I was awake or asleep, existing in some lifeless blur. The only person who really saw how dark my thoughts had become was my sister, who stayed tirelessly by my side. She listened patiently when I admitted how empty the house felt, how I often woke up at 2 a.m. expecting to feel my wife's warm presence next to me. My sister, bless her soul, kept urging me to go out, to slowly reclaim some semblance of life. She worried, rightfully, about my isolation. After a year or so, I began taking small steps outside my comfort zone, a coffee here, a casual dinner there. Nothing too serious. Dating apps felt like another planet, but I tried them on my sister's insistence, having no real luck. It was impossible to banish the echo of my wife's last smile, or the weight of our memories. So I retreated again, convinced the universe wanted me to remain in mourning. But fate, with a little nudge from my sister, had a different plan. Last year, she introduced me to her childhood best friend, Haley, a woman I'd known for years but never considered romantically. Haley was stunning, both inside and out, a gentle, radiant smile, and a kind of unwavering warmth that wrapped around everyone in her orbit. I couldn't fathom why she was interested in a middle-aged widower with a heart so worn and battered. Yet, to my amazement, we clicked. Within weeks of casually dating, we realized this was more than just companionship, it was genuine, deep affection. A long-lost rush of excitement began coursing through my veins. I was alive again, truly alive, for the first time in ages. Haley moved in with me a few months ago. Granted, part of me wanted to pump the brakes. I still carried scars from my wife's passing, but Haley's presence filled the house with laughter and light. Each morning, we had coffee in the sunlit kitchen. Each evening, we talked for hours about hopes and worries, the small joys and heartbreaks that shape us. It felt surreal that I could be this happy after all I'd been through. Naturally, I needed to tell my daughter. She's an adult now and lives on her own, but I still value her love and opinion. As expected, she wasn't thrilled. During her visits over Thanksgiving and Christmas, she visibly tensed whenever Haley and I were affectionate, an arm around the waist here, a quick kiss on the cheek there. It wasn't meant to rub anything in, I was just living in a moment of peace, something I'd once believed I'd never feel again. Still, my daughter insisted it was all too soon, too disrespectful to her mother's memory. I tried to understand her feelings. I truly did. We'd lost the same person, someone incomparable. But no matter how gently I approached the subject, she bristled. Night after night, she called to vent. Last night was the final straw. She said again how Haley's very presence in my house dishonored her mom, and how I'd never been so lovey-dovey with her mom. Was that fair? Did she forget the years of devotion her mother and I shared? Anger flared in my chest. I felt cornered, berated for simply finding a glimmer of happiness. I snapped. I told her, maybe too forcefully, that my life, my choices, and my heart were none of her business. I told her I didn't care if it disrespected my late wife because I was allowed to move on, allowed to feel more than unending grief. Even as the words spilled out, a pang of guilt knotted in my stomach. My daughter's eyes glistened with tears, then she ended the call. Now, the silence weighs on me. I remember the heartbreak in her voice before she hung up. I wonder if I went too far. But the truth remains, I can't let my entire life be defined by loss. My daughter is grown, she doesn't live here anymore. And I want to honor my late wife's memory, yes, but I also want to honor my own right to live, breathe, and love again. I'm torn. Maybe I should have chosen my words more carefully. Perhaps there was a kinder, gentler way to protect my new relationship. The question is, did I overstep in demanding respect for my life choices? Is it selfish to want happiness when I've known sadness for so long? Because at the end of the day, love is love, whether it comes after a tragedy, a year later, or 5 years later. We all heal differently. And maybe I'm just finding my way back to the light after years of darkness. So, tell me, am I the asshole? Update 1. I've been sitting with a storm of guilt, anger, and confusion since that phone call ended. It's like my emotions are all jostling around in a tight suitcase, and no matter how much I shuffle them around, something keeps spilling over the edges. I haven't been able to sleep well, either. Every time I close my eyes, I picture my daughter's face, twisted in tears, like she was reliving her mom's final days. It leaves this hollowness in my stomach that I can't shake, and even though a part of me is still frustrated with her reactions, another part is just shattered knowing I caused my own child that kind of pain. But then I recall the conversation itself. Her words felt like a barrage, one accusation after another. I was trapped, clinging to whatever emotional footing I had left. If I'm being totally honest, I might have used her mother's memory as a shield. I was desperate to defend myself, and the words "I don't care" exploded out of me with more force than I intended. I keep replaying it in my head, wondering if I could have said something softer, gentler. Would it have mattered, though? My daughter was in attack mode. Or at least, that's how it felt in the moment. I haven't called or texted her since then, mostly out of fear. I know I'll have to eventually, but I'm not ready to face the possibility that she might just ignore me or hurl more accusations my way. The silence is daunting, but I also think we both need a little time to calm down. If I force a conversation right now, it might just spiral back into a shouting match. Haley's trying to be supportive, although she's visibly worried. She keeps checking if I'm okay, which only adds to my guilt. She never asked for this drama, never wanted to be seen as the other woman. I hate that my new relationship, which has genuinely healed parts of me I thought were irreparably broken, is causing this rift with my own daughter. Every time Haley asks, "Do you want to talk?" I feel myself half wanting to collapse into her arms and half wanting to shove down everything because I'm too ashamed to admit I'm this torn up. When the topic of my daughter comes up, Haley tries to remind me that healing isn't a straight path, that my daughter lost her mother, and maybe she feels I'm betraying that memory. But as understanding as I'm trying to be, there's a rebellious part of me that's yelling, "Enough is enough. I deserve love, too." Then I question if I'm being selfish. Everyone grieves differently, right? But it's been 5 years. Does that mean I'm rushing? Some folks move on in a year or less. Others might never move on. I have no idea if there's a timeline that makes it magically okay. Grief's not an exact science. My sister has been the buffer between me and the rest of the family. She called me this morning to say my daughter reached out to her. Apparently, my daughter's telling everyone that I said I don't care about her mother's memory at all, which is not exactly accurate but not entirely false, either. It's complicated. I do care about my late wife's memory, obviously I do. But in that heated moment, I just blurted something defensive and horrible. That's the memory she's clinging to, and it stings because I can't go back and unsay it. If I could rewind time, I would have chosen different words, but here we are. My sister suggested we do a family therapy session. Honestly, my first reaction was a resounding hell no. I'm already trying to work on my own mental health, and the idea of sitting in a room, being analyzed while my daughter airs out every accusation, makes me queasy. Yet the more I think about it, the more it might help us move forward. Or at least help us speak to each other in a space that's not so volatile. I mentioned it to Haley, and she was on board, saying she'd stay out of it unless my daughter specifically wanted her there. I appreciated that. It's kind of a relief to know Haley won't push her way into the therapy room and risk magnifying my daughter's resentment. I keep remembering the times my daughter and I had each other's backs. When she was 13 and got stage fright during a school recital, she confessed through tears backstage that she was terrified of embarrassing herself in front of her mom. I hugged her tight, whispered that her mom and I would be proud no matter what, and she walked on stage with trembling knees but a determined smile. Later, when her mother's illness worsened, she was the one comforting me, saying we had to stay strong for mom. We were a team. Now we're practically strangers, both flailing in our separate corners, trying to make sense of it all. I'm also trying to figure out why I never showed this same lovey-dovey side around my wife, at least in front of my daughter. Could it be that we were so weighed down by constant hospital visits, the bone-crushing reality of an illness we knew was terminal? Did we rarely show lighthearted affection because every day felt like a battle? It's also possible that my daughter remembers the stress and sadness more than the softer moments. I'm sure we had them. But it's true my relationship with Haley feels different, unburdened by tragedy. Maybe my daughter interprets that as me being happier than I ever was with her mom. Honestly, that's not fair to the memory of my wife, but it's also not fair to penalize me for finding a shred of joy after years of nothing but sorrow. The worst part is feeling like I'm dishonoring my late wife by moving on, and simultaneously feeling like my daughter wants me stuck in that sorrow forever. I suspect she doesn't actually want me miserable, but it might be tough for her to see me in love again. It's probably a jarring reminder that her mom is truly gone. If I knew how to reassure her that her mom's place in my heart is secure and untouchable, I'd do it in a heartbeat. But everything I've tried just seems to piss her off more. I've also wondered if there's some deeper issue that has nothing to do with me. Maybe she's struggling with her own relationships, or maybe she's been carrying guilt or fear. It's possible she thinks if I fully move on, then she has to move on in her own grieving process, and maybe that terrifies her. I don't blame her. If it took me this long just to open up to someone new, imagine how hard it might be for her to see her father stepping forward while she's still rooted in the past. None of this is simple. Regardless, I've decided I'll shoot her a text soon, something short and heartfelt. I don't want it to be a lecture, just an olive branch. Let her know I do love her, and I do still love her mom's memory, but that I'm trying to live a life that includes joy rather than perpetual mourning. It'll be on her whether she wants to respond or not, but at least I can extend some empathy. If she doesn't bite, I'll look more seriously into therapy options. I hate the idea of letting this drag on until the holidays roll around again and we're forced to awkwardly pretend everything's okay while carving a turkey or singing carols. A small part of me keeps replaying a scenario where my daughter actually tries to sabotage my relationship with Haley. I know that might sound paranoid, but she's so vehemently against it. I hope it never comes to that. Haley, for her part, has been nothing but kind. She even started brainstorming ways to meet my daughter on neutral ground, maybe at a nice brunch where we can keep things light and not devolve into accusing each other. But that might be too soon. My daughter's words are still ringing in my ears. It's disrespectful to mom's memory. It's so harsh, yet at the same time, I can see where it's coming from. She's protecting the mother she lost, the mother she probably idolizes in her mind. No one wants to believe their parent can be replaced, especially by someone they perceive as a near total stranger. Sometimes, when I'm lying in bed next to Haley, I almost expect to feel guilty. But instead, I feel content, comforted, like I'm allowed to be happy again. It's not an insult to my wife's memory. If anything, it's a testament to how deeply she taught me to love. I wouldn't have known how to be this open with Haley if I hadn't learned that from my wife in the first place. So, that's where I'm at. Torn between wanting to protect this fragile piece I've found in my life and wanting to make amends with my daughter before we grow even more distant. I can't keep letting my grief, and her grief, pit us against each other. It's been 5 years, and every day since my wife's death has felt like trudging through knee-high mud, except now I finally see a path forward. I can't lose that hope. But I also can't lose my daughter. This is probably just the first major step in a long journey of healing, one that includes not just me, but my daughter and Haley too. And if it means swallowing my pride and telling my daughter I'm sorry in a calm, measured way, then that's what I'll do. I just don't want to risk letting my frustration overshadow that apology. She's still my child, no matter how old she gets, and I do love her. For now, I'm giving both of us a little breathing room, maybe a day or two more. After that, I'll send that text. I might even consider my sister's suggestion about family therapy. I don't know if it'll fix everything, but it's a shot. Staying quiet, hoping it all blows over, clearly isn't working. I'm not trying to paint myself as some flawless victim here. I know my reaction on that call was harsh. But if my daughter's going to accuse me of disrespecting her mother just because I'm smiling again, I can't stay silent forever. I hope she'll see that there's enough space in my heart to respect the past and embrace the future. But I'm well aware we have a rocky road ahead. I guess all I can do is keep walking it, step by step, and hope she decides to walk alongside me. That's all I have for now. I'm already feeling anxious about how this will play out, but maybe putting it into words will help me find the courage to reach out. My daughter needs to know that my love for her mother hasn't disappeared, it's just taken on a different shape, and that shape has room for Haley, too. Maybe one day, my daughter will believe that. I sure hope so. Update 2. Here we are, weeks after that tumultuous call with my daughter, and I've been sitting on a seesaw of emotions. Some days I feel like I'm finally making progress, on others, it's like I'm back at square one. I want to thank everyone who shared their thoughts and experiences in my previous posts. It really helped me frame my next steps and, honestly, kept me sane during some darker moments. So, after much reflection, and yes, a bit of hesitation, I reached out to my daughter with a text. I kept it simple, heartfelt, just letting her know that I missed her and regretted the way our last conversation ended. I mentioned that I loved her and still held her mother's memory dear, but I was also trying to find happiness in a world that felt incredibly empty without her mom. The wait for her reply was agonizing. Every buzz of my phone made my heart jump. But eventually, she did text back. Her response was cautious, which I expected, but she didn't shut me out. She said she needed time to process everything but agreed to meet and talk. Honestly, just getting to that point felt like a small victory. We decided to meet at a quiet cafe, neutral ground. The day was nerve-wracking. I kept running through what I wanted to say, worried about saying too much or not enough. Haley was supportive, offering to come with me, but I needed to do this one-on-one with my daughter. Sitting across from her in the cafe was surreal. She looked so much like her mother it took my breath away for a moment. We started off tentatively, small talk about her job, her life. It was a bit awkward, but it was a start. Then we edged into the heavier stuff. I apologized again for my harsh words during our last call. I explained that I never intended to disrespect her mother's memory, that my relationship with Haley wasn't about replacing anyone but about allowing myself to feel joy again. I talked about how grief had enveloped me for so long that feeling anything positive felt foreign and, in a strange way, like a betrayal to the sadness we'd both been living in. My daughter listened. Really listened. When she spoke, she shared how seeing me with Haley made her feel like her mom was being erased, like those years of pain were somehow less significant because I was finding a way to move forward. She admitted it was hard for her to see me happy when she still felt so much pain. It was a tough conversation, emotional and raw, but necessary. We both cried. A lot. It wasn't all resolved in that one sit down. These things never are. But it opened a door we'd both been keeping shut for too long. We agreed to start attending family therapy sessions. It was actually my daughter who suggested we keep going, seeing it as a way to bridge our feelings and start healing together. As for Haley, she's been an absolute rock through all of this. She understands my need to mend things with my daughter and has never pushed beyond what I'm comfortable with. My daughter has agreed to meet her again, this time knowing more about where I'm coming from. We're planning a casual lunch at my house next month. Nothing big, just a chance for Haley and my daughter to interact without the weight of our past hanging over them. Reflecting on everything, I've learned that grief doesn't have a timetable. It twists, turns, and comes back in waves when you least expect it. But it also doesn't have to be a solitary journey. Opening up, being vulnerable with my daughter and with strangers online, has shown me that moving forward isn't about forgetting, it's about finding new ways to remember while allowing ourselves to experience new joys. This might be my final update here, but it's far from the end of my journey. I'm just taking it one day at a time, hopeful for what the future holds, and grateful for the chance to share my story with people who understand. Thank you all for being part of this chapter of my life. Here's to the next steps, however wobbly they may be.